Hi, welcome to Todd's Tips. I'm Todd Barsness of Full-Time Voiceover Talent, and Todd's Tips is a feature of VO Marketing Pro. Now, if you'd like more information about VO Marketing Pro or anything else related to voiceover, just visit our Facebook page, website, or contact us via email. The links are located here. This first part, we're not going to spend a ton of time, but on your screen, you'll see a very crude, simple, just information. And it's just a scale of 10 to 1, 10 being an expert and 1 being kind of a know-nothing. And I don't mean that in a terrible way. It's just that you are novice. You just don't know that much about it. And so you'll see that on the screen, and we'll walk through that. And I don't know how many weeks we'll work on this, but we'll do it here for a few minutes. And the whole purpose is I wanted people to be able to evaluate themselves. This isn't exhaustive, but these are some of the things that I evaluate myself on as far as where do I fit realistically, honestly, in all humility, where do I fit on the expert down to kind of a know-nothing, where I really need some more education, I need some help, I need some coaching, because it's important. I can't remember who said it, but one of the things somebody once said, some philosopher back, 2,000 years ago said, know thyself, know thyself. And I think a proper estimation of oneself is very, very important. And that's really what humility is. It's not humble to say, I don't know anything, or I'm not very good, or I'm not an expert, but nor is it humble to have to think you're an expert in everything, because there's just very few people that are an expert in multiple areas. There are some experts in one area, maybe some really brilliant people that are in 2 or 3, but within an industry even, like voiceover, for instance, I don't consider myself an expert in everything voiceover. And I know you call yourself a novice in voiceover, and you have a lot to learn yet. But it's important to say, what are my strong points? What are my weak points? Where do I need help? Maybe where do I need to get some help? Who am I going to get some help from? And so going back to this simple diagram of expert down to know nothing, one of the reasons I use these, and I've done this before with my numbers and different things like that. One of the reasons I use these simple, crude graphs, stats, charts, it's on purpose. You have any idea why I would just maybe have this be very simple and almost just handwritten?
Why do you do that?
Yeah. Any idea why I would?
Because you're not an expert?
In making these graphs? Yeah, probably. Well, that's exactly, I'm glad you nailed that.
I guess.
Because that's exactly what I was going to say was because I can't do much better than this. That's, what you're seeing on the screen. I'm kind of old. I don't have all the great gifts of working with technology and things like that, and how to make these types of things on a computer. I just don't know. So what do? I just hand draw them. But second of all, it's kind of to prove a point. It really is. It's to prove a point that you don't need a lot of fancy high-tech stats, charts, CRMs, databases, etc., to have a thriving voiceover business. And with my multiple 6-figure direct email marketing income, we use Google, Excel spreadsheet, and Microsoft 365. It's very simple. It's not complex. And I kind of like that. I'm a simple mind, simple pleasures. So that's one of the reasons that I do it. One, I can't do much better than this. And second of all, I think it's to a little bit prove the point that maybe sometimes people get off track when they try to do all the fancy stuff. And being busy makes you feel like you're doing something. But in actuality, you're just kind of spinning your wheels. Well, I'm not against using them all. That's not my point. What were you going to say?
I've talked about how, when I first looked at you and you doing your business, when I was a personal trainer, I thought, boy, that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of organization and stuff like that. But when you get into it, and you keep it simple like that, it's not, there is a lot of organization, and you've got to keep things, planned out and stuff like that. But once you're in it, when you're in it and really in it, it's not as crazy as I thought it would be. So that makes sense to me.
So any industry, what you're saying, I think what you're saying is any industry, whether it's training, health, those types of, you have to have a plan and you have to keep track of things and you have to be organized and disciplined. So I'm not against that, obviously, but just not becoming kind of a hamster on a wheel, thinking that you're really doing something by having all these fancy, things, when simple things sometimes can work best.
Especially
and
if
make
you
sure
run
they
it-
work for you. That's, I guess, the point.
especially if you run it well.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So whatever you have as a CRM or a database or whatever, just make sure that it works for you and that it's getting you somewhere. I think that's the thing, just talking about this whole thing in general. So let's just unpackage this for just a few minutes. We won't get through it all. Maybe we'll do another week or two on this. There's lots of so-called experts out there. And honestly, Hudson, they drive me just a little bit crazy, especially when they themselves haven't been in the industry for very long. Maybe they've only been in the industry for a few years, and thus they don't have a proven track record. Again, I can learn something from anybody. The newest newbie, the newest novice. I learn things from you. I know that, like in editing, Mom has been editing for a long time. I taught her. She's been doing editing for 6-7 years, and she taught you and Deshaun how to do editing. But in the process of that, because you're more technologically advanced, you taught her some things.
Shortcuts.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's learning to be done on all sides. So that's not what I'm saying. So don't get me wrong. It's not like you've got to be in for 10 years. Otherwise, you can't speak to anything. Obviously, that's not true. But here's the other point. These, quote, experts are selling their wares not on long-standing track records of being in the VO industry for a long time as a VO talent and proving their success as a VO talent, but instead making most of their money on coaching. And so we need to be able to think clearly about that. Just because somebody says something good sounding doesn't mean they know how to put that into practice. So just be careful as you think about yourself, where you're an expert. Be humble, but also as you hear a lot of people offering their opinions and such, be careful to vet them carefully as well. Does that make sense?
And you've talked about that in the past, and maybe you'll get into that. But the people who share their numbers, I know Bill does that.
Bill DeWeese, yeah.
Yep, and that's where you learn that from. And being able to find somebody that does that so that you can decide, okay, does this person make more on coaching? Or does he make more on voiceover? And so if he's, making more in voiceover and he's like, okay, then you can say, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about, because the proof is in the pudding. Where if somebody's making $100,000 coaching, but they're making $30,000 in voiceover, it's like, maybe, or they don't share their numbers because it's that might be. I'm not saying everybody, but that might be a reason why they don't share their numbers, because deep down,
Yeah. And so I guess the point being is there might be exceptions, most certainly. There have been people that have been in the industry for years and years and years and are expert in a lot of VO areas. And now maybe they're slowing down. And that might happen to me as I get a little bit older. Maybe I won't be so in the studio all the time. Maybe my voice won't be as marketable someday. And so that will start to diminish, and maybe I'll do some more coaching, and maybe eventually my coaching numbers financially will go up and my VO numbers will go down. I still think you want to be a little careful, because you also have to stay connected to the industry, because the industry is changing. So just be a little bit careful. Humility, as I said before, is a proper estimation of yourself. You need to know yourself, and to be like, I'm an expert in everything. I'm careful with people that say that. I'm an expert in everything VO. Or they say, I don't know anything about VO. You've been in the industry for 5 years and you don't know anything about VO? That's not true. So, and there's areas that you can learn and become more proficient in. And when I go through this, as you see that on your screen, as I go through this, you'll see some things that are VO related that I'm going to say that I'm not the greatest at. Now, I can take the time to maybe learn and get better at those things. Or maybe sometimes I'll say, I don't have the time, or I don't want to take the time. So I'm going to leverage that with somebody else who does that, i.e. an Alex DeWeese. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But let's just look at this. Now, to date, I haven't charged for any coaching that I've done. But if I did, I'd want you to know where I stand on competency. on these different things in the different parts of the VO industry. And I would want you to know where you stand, and as you vet coaches, where they would stand. And you might want to ask them, where do you think you're an expert? How do you think you can help me? And where you need help is where you're going to need to get a coach from. Thanks a lot for joining me for Todd's Tips. And if you'd like more information about VO Marketing Pro or anything else related to VO, the links are listed here.